At 1:47 a.m., deep in the hydroelectric tunnels carved behind Niagara Falls, Joseph Vance and contractor Robert Chen inspected turbine intake 3. The deafening roar of cascading water cut out with no warning. Total silence pressed in. Rule 4 flashed through Joseph's mind. The one rule every crew member learns and fears. If the water stops, do not turn around.
Don't turn. Don't turn.
There's a corridor. It goes back a long way, further than the shaft should reach. It's lit with a green light. I can see figures standing in alcoves along the walls. I am going to take a closer look.
Joseph heard Robert's boots scrape against the iron grates, each step farther into impossible silence. He kept his eyes forward, every muscle locked. The roar crashed back with violent force. Joseph spun around. The tunnel behind him was empty. Robert was gone. His flashlight lay on the grate, beam aimed into nothing. Joseph stood alone, the falls thundering overhead, knowing Rule 4 had just saved his life, and that the man behind him had been waiting. Joseph staggered from the intake chamber into the freezing night, the falls roaring overhead. 14 years in these tunnels, he knew every rusted grate, weeping concrete wall, and blind corner better than his own apartment. On his first day, Foreman Ed Morrison handed him a laminated sheet without explanation.
Memorize every one. They're not in the safety manual. They're the only reason you'll walk out at the end of a shift.
Old-timer superstition. That's what I figured.
3 hours after Robert vanished, he sat in that same office, the cards still on the desk.
You didn't turn around when the water stopped. That's why you were breathing and Robert wasn't found.
14 years, and I finally knew the rules weren't cautionary tales.
The rules were a fence between the crew and something patient waiting in the dark. There were 6 of them. Joseph could recite each one like a prayer now. Rule 1. Never enter the spillway after midnight. Even during emergency repairs, the crew waits until dawn.
Decent men went in there at 2 in the morning because a pressure valve needed checking. Only one walked back. The survivor, I found him curled against a pump housing, wet to the bone, eyes wide as plates. He kept whispering, "The deep water. It's still watching. Not water from the falls, something else."
Morrison never said what the survivor saw. He just ended the story there and stared at the wall.
When I heard that my first week, I didn't sleep. I'd lie awake picturing that man's face.
The spillway gate still stands at the end of a long sloping tunnel, chained shut after 6 p.m. A red sign warns, "No entry, 2,600 hours." Below it, someone scratched a single word into the metal, "Don't." Joseph never asked Morrison what the survivor saw. He wasn't sure he wanted to know, but every time he passed that chained gate after midnight, he heard the survivor's voice in his head. The deep water is still watching. Rule 2. If you see a door you don't recognize, do not open it. The tunnels shift. A door that wasn't there yesterday appears in a concrete wall. Joseph learned this in 2016, deep in a sealed maintenance shaft. He saw a heavy wooden door with iron hinges, aged but spotless.
No record of this door. It shouldn't be here.
He reached for the handle, curiosity overpowering every instinct.
"Don't."
Morrison's hand clamped onto his shoulder and wrenched him backward, away from the door.
I said don't open it. Ever. A contractor named Lyle opened one. We never saw him again.
Morrison pointed to a scar on the floor, a deep gouge in the concrete where something heavy had been dragged. The scar wasn't old. It was fresh. Joseph never saw that door again. But he thinks about it every time he passes a blind corner. Rule 3. If the emergency lights flicker twice, evacuate immediately, but do not run. Running attracts whatever hunts in the dark. Joseph learned this in 2013, 30 feet from a coworker named Jake.
Jake was new. He didn't believe the rules yet.
The emergency lights flickered twice, a long pause between. Jake's face went slack. Then he ran. Joseph called after him, but the sound of boots faded too fast, too quiet. They searched for 3 days. No body, no equipment, just scuff marks in the concrete that ended mid-stride.
Don't run. Never run. Morrison said it 6 times that night.
In the years since, 3 others have run. Only one was found, sealed behind a wall in a disused sump, wearing someone else's hard hat. The hard hat had the name of a worker who'd vanished 10 years earlier. Rule 4. If you hear the water stop, do not turn around. The rule that cost Robert Chen his life and saved Joseph's. In 1983, a 5-man crew heard the silence. They turned. The corridor was there, lit green with alcoves. 4 men walked into it. Only one stayed. The survivor walked out alone, but his nameplate read Carl Meade. His old crew swore it had said David Vance. He didn't remember his wife. He signed his new name like he'd used it for years.
Before Robert, I thought that was a horror story. After Robert, I knew it was a survivor's account.
Morrison kept a photo of the 1983 crew on his desk. Joseph never asked which one was David Vance. Rule 4 was the keystone. Break it, and you either vanish or come back wearing someone else's life.
I broke it exactly once. That was 3 years ago. The man behind me has been waiting for me to break it again ever since.
The man waiting was patient. It always was. Rule 5. Never respond to a voice calling your name from a dead-end shaft. In 1991, a worker heard his foreman's voice echoing from a sealed tube. He answered and stepped inside. They heard his boots on metal for 30 seconds. Then silence. The shaft was sealed with concrete that night.
Every time I pass that shaft, I walk faster.
Rule 6. If you find a wet footprint that isn't yours, mark it and report to the foreman. Joseph found one in 2017, a single wet boot print on dry concrete, leading to a blank wall.
I chalked it. Morrison logged it. By next shift, it was gone.
Sometimes the prints appear in pairs, spaced like someone paused. They always end at walls or sealed hatches. 6 rules. Each one a debt paid in someone's life. He never broke one on purpose. He hoped he never would. In 2018, Joseph was running a solo pressure check in the lower service gallery when the roar of the falls cut out. The silence was absolute. He couldn't hear his own breathing, only the rush of blood in his ears.
Rule 4. Don't turn.
A presence pressed against his back, close enough that the air shifted, carrying a smell of wet stone and something older.
It's right there. If I turn, I am gone.
The silence stretched for an eternity. Then the water crashed back, and Joseph sucked in air like a drowning man. When he finally moved, he saw it. A single wet boot print on the dry concrete beside his own.
It came from nowhere, and it wasn't mine.
He marked it with chalk and reported to Morrison. The foreman's face went gray. Morrison said nothing for a long while. Then he just nodded, wrote it down, and told Joseph to avoid solo patrols near that shaft. 3 weeks after Robert Chen vanished, Morrison called Joseph into his office before the shift started.
Look at this.
A routine inquiry from a hydroelectric plant in Argentina. Our records show Robert Chen has been employed at this facility continuously since March 2015.
He worked here for 3 years, but Argentina says he's been there for almost a decade.
Morrison opened the Argentine plant's staff webpage. A photo of Robert Chen smiled beneath a different hard hat, his shift schedule current.
He's alive. That doesn't make any sense.
According to their records, he's worked every shift this week. Their foreman swears the man in the photo is Robert Chen.
The Argentine logs showed 9 years of pay stubs and performance reviews. all predating his hire date in Niagara.
He walked into that corridor 3 weeks ago. How could he have worked in Argentina for almost a decade?
Joseph stared at the smiling photo and felt the rules shift from protection to a cage. The tunnel didn't just take people. It rewrote them. Joseph requested his personnel file that morning. Morrison handed it over without a word. He opened the folder. One line at the top. Start date, the 12th of March, 1996.
I was hired in 2010. This has to be a mistake.
He called HR, his voice shaking. The clerk pulled up his record. The clerk's reply was firm. His employment history was continuous since 1996.
That's impossible. I have coworkers who can confirm I started in 2010.
A long pause. Then the clerk. There was no other hire date on file.
Then who am I? What came out of the silence in 2018?
Morrison called a crewmate from 2010. The man had no memory of Joseph from that year. Joseph stared at his hands, the file photo now belonging to someone else, and felt the presence behind him settle closer. He spent the next 3 nights in the facility's archive, pulling folders and microfiche. Old newspapers covered disappearances with identical details. The water stopped. The man turned. The corridor appeared. Every case ended the same. The vanished worker surfaced months later in a plant on the other side of the world.
Each one had a new start date that stretched back impossibly far. Just like Robert. Just like me.
He drew a timeline on the wall of his locker room, connecting names and dates. The pattern was undeniable. The silent water wasn't a local anomaly. It was a door, and the door was always open.
My own incident, 2018. The silence lasted 40 seconds. I didn't turn. But what if I did? What if I just don't remember?
He found a clipping from 1995. A worker named Don Crane had vanished during a night shift, then reappeared in a Montana dam 2 decades later, with employment logs dating to 1975. The photograph in the article showed a face that looked nothing like the man on file, but the man in the photo was smiling, holding a hard hat with Crane's name.
Something walks out of the corridor wearing your life, and I broke Rule 4 once. What if the man who came back isn't me?
Joseph found Morrison alone in his office, staring at a reflection in the window.
You've been here since the 70s. You know what happens when someone turns. Tell me the truth.
I turned once, 1979. The water stopped in the spillway. I looked. I saw the corridor. I saw the things in the alcoves, but I didn't walk in. I forced myself to turn back.
Morrison's hand trembled as he pointed at the glass. A shadow stood directly behind his own reflection.
Ever since that night, it's been behind me. It gets closer every time the water stops. One day, I'll feel its hand on my shoulder, and when I turn, it'll walk past me into the corridor, and I'll be gone.
He's carried this for 40 years, and I've carried mine since 2018.
Yours is patient. It waited 3 years, but Robert's replacement already walked. You felt it that night. It'll come again.
Joseph saw his own reflection and the flicker of a second silhouette waiting. In the silent locker room, Joseph tore a page from his logbook and began to write. The note was brief. If I don't return, tell them I broke Rule 4. Don't look for me. He pulled on his yellow overalls with deliberate care, sealing each zipper and checking the rubber gauntlets.
I am walking in as Joseph Vance. Whatever comes out of that corridor, it won't be me.
The pipe wrench felt heavier than usual when he hooked it to his belt.
Rule 4 says don't turn, but I need to see what's behind me.
He clipped his headlamp into place and tested the beam. The light cut through the dim locker room like a blade. At 11:30 p.m., Joseph descended alone into the maintenance tunnel, the roar of the falls already drowning out every other sound. The tunnels felt narrower tonight. the shadows deeper where the emergency lights didn't reach.
He didn't look back. Not yet. But he knew it was had been following since 2018.
The turbine intake chamber swallowed him whole. The roar was so loud he felt it in his bones. He took his position facing the pipe, the same spot Robert had turned.
Don't turn. That's the rule. But tonight, I am breaking it on purpose.
He began reciting the rules under his breath, each one a shield. 1. Never enter the spillway after midnight. 2. Never open an unknown door. 3. Walk, don't run.
And rule 4. If the water stops, don't turn around. The one I am about to smash.
The cold began at the base of his spine, a presence like the memory of a winter wind spreading upward.
It's right behind me. I can feel it reaching for my shoulder.
He forced his breathing to slow, eyes locked on the rusted pipe ahead, every muscle screaming to turn.
Not yet. Not until the silence.
The roar pressed in, the dark waited, and Joseph stood exactly where Robert had vanished, facing forward but ready to turn. And so he waited, the roar his only company, the cold shape behind him growing more patient by the second. The digital clock on the control panel flicked to 1:47. The roar didn't stop. It drowned. Sound vanished, as if a door had slammed on the world. The silence was heavier than the water ever was. A voice, not human, whispered directly behind him. Joseph.
Don't answer. Rule 5.
A cold hand, smooth as wet stone, settled on his right shoulder. The fingers curled gently.
If I turn, it walks past me. That's how it works.
Joseph did not answer. He did not move. Every instinct screamed, but he held still, counting his own heartbeats. The hand tightened, and the silence grew expectant, as if the thing behind him was waiting for permission.
I came here to break Rule 4. But this isn't a rule. It's a door.
He had to turn. The hand was waiting. But for one more breath, Joseph faced the dark pipe and held the line. Joseph turned. The maintenance tunnel was gone, replaced by a long stone corridor lit in green phosphorescent glow, alcoves carved into walls that shouldn't exist. Inches from his face stood a figure in the same yellow overalls, the same hard hat, but the face was Joseph's own, hollow-eyed and smiling.
It's me, but not me. The thing from the footprint.
The double's lips parted. Its voice was Joseph's own, but layered with the whisper of underground water. You kept me waiting.
3 years. It's been behind me for 3 years.
The hand that had been on his shoulder now rested lightly on his chest, as if measuring his heartbeat. But now you've turned. Now we talk. The double's smile didn't reach its hollow eyes.
Talk. Robert talked. And then he walked.
The double stepped back, gesturing toward the endless corridor with a flick of its gloved hand. The alcoves seemed to stir, and in the silence, the offer hung unspoken, the same offer Robert took.
When the water stops, a door opens. Not for everyone, only for the one who turns. It's true. Every case in the archive, every disappearance happened at a silence. Walk into the corridor, and you are reborn somewhere else. Your past is rewritten to match the life that was waiting. Robert walked. He's in Argentina, with 9 years of fabricated history.
The air shimmered, and Joseph glimpsed Robert loading tools into a pickup. A woman he'd never met handing him a lunchbox.
That life could be yours. A life without debt, without the memory of these tunnels. But if you stay, I follow. Forever. He's offering me a fresh start, but it wouldn't be mine. It never was. You should have gone in 2018. You forced me to wait. Now you've turned, and the offer is here again.
The figures in the alcove stirred, their outlines more distinct now, workers who had turned, waiting for the next walker. Joseph stood at the threshold. The double waited, the corridor promised, and somewhere beyond, the silence held its breath.
Number I am not walking. This life, the one I have, the one I remember, it's mine, even if it isn't. Better to be followed forever than to become someone else's fiction. Then you will wait, and soon you will not need to turn. I will simply walk past you.
The double's hand fell from his chest, and the stone corridor shuddered, cracks spreading like veins.
We are not finished.
The corridor collapsed into a storm of green light and falling stone. The roar of the falls slammed back into the chamber with physical force, shaking the grates underfoot. Joseph was alone in the maintenance tunnel again. The pipe ahead dripped in the dark, but behind him, inches from his back, the cold presence remained, patient, eternal. Rule 4 had saved him once, but now he knew. It was only a delay, not a pardon. He walked out of the turbine intake, not looking back, though the cold shadow clung to his heels like a second skin. By the time he reached Morrison's office, dawn was bleeding through the small window. His personnel file was still on the desk. He opened it with numb fingers. The start date remained the 12th of March, 1996. But below it, a new line. Previous assignment, Rio Gallegos Hydroelectric Plant, Argentina.
Argentina. The same plant that claims Robert worked there for 9 years. Now it's in my file.
The photograph clipped to the page had changed. The face was still his, but older, wearier. Behind him in the image, faint but unmistakable, stood the double.
He's not just behind me. He's inside my history now.
Joseph closed the file. The presence behind him felt heavier, more permanent, like a second heartbeat. He sat in the break room, and his reflection in the window showed the double waiting behind him. Joseph stood before 2 new hires in the break room, a worn whiteboard behind him with the 6 rules printed in his own hand.
There are 6 rules. Learn them like your life depends on it, because it does. They look at me like I used to look at Morrison. Skeptical, young, safe.
He underlined Rule 4 so hard the marker squeaked.
If the water stops, do not turn around. No matter what you hear, no matter how close it feels.
The younger man's hand trembled slightly as he flipped a page of his notebook.
I never tell them about the double. They wouldn't believe me until it's too late. You follow every rule, every shift, no exceptions.
He tapped Rule 4 on the board one last time, the paper worn thin from years of the same motion. The 2 workers glanced at each other. Something in Joseph's hollow tone made it clear the rule was not a story. Months later, Joseph walked the service tunnel alone. The roar of the falls, a constant pressure in his ears. He leaned close to read a gauge. In the curved glass, the reflection showed his own tired face, and just behind, the double's hollow eyes.
Don't turn. You know the rule.
The double's face was inches away in the reflection, its smile gone, waiting with infinite patience. Joseph's hand trembled on the pipe wrench, but he kept his eyes locked forward, never turning.
It's always behind me now. Every shift, every gauge, every silent moment.
He forced himself to write the pressure reading in his logbook. The numbers shook, but he made them legible. The cold presence didn't leave. It followed as he walked to the next checkpoint, a step behind in the dark.
As long as I don't turn, I am still me, still breathing, still following Rule 4.
And in the dark tunnel, the double followed, patient, eternal, waiting for the one mistake. Joseph Vance still works the maintenance tunnels. 16 years since his first shift, and 2 years since Robert Chen vanished. He has never broken Rule 4 again. The 6 rules are muscle memory, but Rule 4 lives in his spine. Every time the water dips, his body tenses. He waits for the silence, the cold hand, the whispered name. He checks his logbook, writes the numbers steady, and refuses to let his hand shake. When a new hire asks why they never work alone after midnight, Joseph doesn't answer. He underlines Rule 4 twice. The new workers learn the rules. They will never hear the full truth from Joseph. It wouldn't help them. Some nights, he wakes at 1:47 a.m. and listens. The falls always roar, but he knows the silence will come again. The double is always there, in reflections, in gauge glasses, in the edge of his shadow. It only waits. Joseph still has not turned. Every shift is a test. Every gauge read a quiet victory, and behind him, the man who is not a man waits for the moment Joseph forgets Rule 4 and turns.